Good morning. I'm back. We're reading Ursula K LeGuin, No Time to Spare. We're so close to being done. Let's see. I don't remember. Oh, right. We read to the end and we're on part 4, rewards. I wanted to preface this by saying there's an apple tree outside that really wants to come into the building. So if you hear squeaking, that's what's going on there. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. Okay. The circling stars, the sea surrounding. Philip Glass, John Luther Adams. We've read this one. Wow, I've read further than I thought. Okay. Without Egg. July 2011. Visiting Vienna in the early 1950s, Charles and I stayed in style for a very little expense at the old König von Ungarn Hotel, which had been there since at least the 1820s. We ate breakfast at a cafe around the corner, always the same cafe and the same breakfast. Good coffee, fresh fruit, crisp rolls with butter and jam, and a soft-boiled egg. Perfect, invariable, every morning. I don't know why I got it in my head one morning to vary it, but I did. And when the tall, middle-aged waiter arrived in his impeccable dark coat, I indicated that I wanted the usual breakfast without the egg. He appeared not to understand, which, given the quality of my German, was understandable. I repeated something like kein Ei or on Ei. He responded slowly in a shaken voice. On Ei? He was disturbed. I was ruthless. Yes, I said, without egg. I don't know German that well, but I'm trying to guess what she could be saying. He stood for quite a while silent, trying to handle the shock. He visibly forced himself not to appeal or plead or show his disapproval. He was a waiter, a disciplined, skillful Viennese waiter, and must obey the most perverse customer. Without egg, madam. Without egg, madam, he said softly, almost unreproachfully, and went away to fetch my eggless breakfast. When he brought and set before me with silent funereal dignity. We still laugh recalling that tiny incident of nearly 60 years ago, but it is also kept alive in my memory by a sense of guilt. For one thing, in 1954 in Vienna, an egg meant something. The city was just coming out of very bad times. It was still occupied, divided among the U.S., the British, and the Russian armies. The cathedral had re-arisen, and the opera house was re-arising from the rubble of bombing, but damage and destruction was everywhere, and the effect of privation plain to see in the faces and bodies of people on the street. An offer of food in a city that has gone hungry is not a small matter. Also, I willfully and needlessly disturbed the order of that waiter's universe. A very small universe, the Viennese cafe breakfast, but a stable, orderly, perfected one. Better not change something that has achieved excellence. And it was unkind to demand of a person who spent his life working, maintaining that excellence, to impair it, to do something he so clearly felt was wrong. After all, I could have let him bring the egg and simply not eaten it. He was far too good at his job to have taken notice, except possibly for a mild, commiserative, "Madam doesn't feel hungry this morning?" To have an egg and not to eat it was my privilege. To refuse to let him bring the egg was to interfere with his privilege, which was to bring me a complete and proper Viennese cafe breakfast. I still want to laugh when I think about it, and I still feel a twinge of guilt. The guilt has increased since I began, a couple of years ago, to have a soft-boiled egg for breakfast, to have, in fact, a Viennese cafe breakfast every morning, invariably. I can't get those lovely, light, crisp European rolls. Why do the artisanal bread people in this country think crust should be thick and tough? The more leathery, the more artisanal? But Thomas's English muffins are very good, so I have them with tea, fruit, and 3.5-minute egg, eaten as in Vienna from the shell. To soft boil an egg, I put it in a small pot with cold water to cover. Set it on high heat till it boils furiously, take it off at once, turn over the egg timer, 3.5-minute glass, and start toasting the muffins. When the sand is through the glass, the egg comes out of the water and into the egg cup. As you see, a certain care and ceremony is involved, which is what I wanted to talk about and also why the egg cup is important. If you crack a soft-boiled egg and dump it out into a bowl, it tastes the same, but it isn't the same. It's too easy, it's dull, it might as well have been poached. The point of a soft-boiled egg is the difficulty of eating it, the attention it requires, the ceremony. So you put your freshly boiled egg into the egg cup, but not everybody is familiar with egg cups. In this country, they are usually an hourglass shape, with one lobe or big bowl bigger than the other. The small end is just big enough to hold the egg. You could eat it there from its shell, but most Americans take it out, turn the egg cup over, crack the egg, and dump it into the larger bowl where they smush it around and eat it. British and European egg cups don't offer that option. They have no big bowl. They are just a small china cup on a short pedestal, like a goblet, in which the egg sits upright. You have no choice but to eat your egg out of its own shell. This is where things get ceremonial and interesting. So you put your freshly boiled egg into the egg cup, but which end up? Eggs are not perfect ovoids. They have a smaller end and a bigger end. People have opinions about which end should be up, which end you're actually going to eat the egg out of. This difference of opinion can become so passionate that a war may be fought about it, as we know from Jonathan Swift. It makes just as much sense as most wars and most differences of opinion. I am a big ender. My opinion, which I will defend to the death, is that if the big end is up, it's easier to get the spoon into the opening created when you knock off the top of the egg with a single decisive whack of your knife blade. Or possibly another weighty decision, another matter of opinion, with advocates and enemies, the righteous and the unrighteous, you lift the top of the egg off carefully from the egg encircling crack you have made by tapping the shell with the knife blade all the way around, about a half-inch down from the summit. Some mornings I whack, some mornings I tap. I have no opinion on the matter, it depends on my mood. Some elements of the ceremony offer no choice. The knife has to be steel, since the sulfur in eggs blacken silver, and the egg spoon must also be untarnishable, stainless steel or horn. I've never seen a gold egg spoon, but I'm sure it would do. Whatever the material, the spoon has to have a small bowl with a fine edge on it. A thick edge won't coax all the egg white off the inside of the shell. The handle is short for good balance and easy handling. An egg spoon is a tiny implement like the Viennese breakfast cannot be improved. Like all good tools, it gives pleasure by its pure aptness. It does one thing only, but does it perfectly, and nothing else can do it. Trying to eat an egg from a shell with a normal spoon is like mending a wristwatch with a hammer. The sole imperfection of the egg spoon is that it's so small it gets lost. Horn spoons are larger, but the beautiful horn spoon my daughter gave me finally wore out, its edges becoming coarse and fibrous. Replacement can be a problem. Most Americans don't eat their eggs from the shell, and the implement has become rare and hard to find. When I see one, I acquire it. My current egg spoon is stainless steel. On the handle are the letters KLM. I will not go into how we came to own this spoon. My best guess is she got it from the KLM Airlines. You see what I mean about difficulty. Eating an egg from the shell takes not only practice but resolution, even courage, possibly willingness to commit crime. If you are in the whacking mood, the first whack of the knife on the shell is decisive. A firm whack on a good shell in the right place, decapitates the egg cleanly with one blow. Ideal. But some eggshells are feeble and crumbly, and sometimes your aim is tentative or faulty. After all, this is something you have to do before breakfast. If you hit too high, the opening isn't big enough. Too low, you get into yolk, which you don't want to do yet. So maybe you choose to tap instead of whacking. Nowhere near as exciting, but you have more control of the outcome. So now you have opened your egg. You stick the spoon right down into it, but not too suddenly, or the yolk will well up and dribble wastefully out down the outside of the shell. The 3.5-minute egg white is barely firm, while the yolk has thickened just enough to make a beautiful golden sauce for the white. Your job is to mix the two nicely so you get a balance of yolk and white in each spoonful while not destroying the delicate little bowl you're eating from, the eggshell. This takes attention. The more complete the attention, the more you actually taste the egg. It may be apparent by now that this whole blog is a subtle blow against double tasking and a paean to doing one single thing with, as the Bible puts it, all thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. Nor is there breakfast there. The grave is without egg. The flavor of a fresh, soft-boiled egg is extremely subtle. I like salt and pepper on a fried egg, but nothing at all on a boiled egg. It is completely satisfactory in and by itself. If a little butter from the muffin gets in it too, that's fine. The soft-boiled egg experience is the same every morning and never the same. It remains endlessly interesting. It is invariably delicious. It delivers a small, solid dose of high-quality protein. Who could ask for more? Of course, I'm very lucky. I can get toxin-free eggs at our co-op from local farmers who don't cage their birds in pest holes and don't feed them carrion. The eggs are brown with strong shells and orange yolks, not the weak, pallid things laid by hens kept in filth and torment all their lives. The Oregon legislature has at last decided to ban poultry batteries. Hurrah! The ban to take effect in 2024. Unhurrah. The lobbies who run our lives demand that torture, order, and disease continue for 13 more years. I will not live to see the birds go free. Notre Dame de la Femme, October 2011. I visited a great cathedral this week. It's situated in a mixed industrial, small business, residential area not far from the Portland airport. An odd place for a cathedral, but it has a huge congregation and is full of people, not just on Sundays, but every day of the week. It's big. Notre Dame de Paris covers about 67,000 square feet. This one is nearly twice as big, 108,000 square feet. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen this place. 2 full city blocks, and its overflow adjunct building across the river covers 94,000 square feet. Notre Dame, which, with its towers, is much taller and is built of stone all carved with saints and gargoyles, and is endearingly ancient and beautiful. This one looks rather unimpressive as you approach it, partly because there are buildings near it and you can't really get a view of it, and partly because It wasn't built long ago to celebrate and embody spiritual worship, but recently in dire need for a specific material purpose. Still, I wouldn't discount a very large element of the spirit in the building. From the outside, it looks like a particularly huge warehouse, but it hasn't the strangely menacing fortress-like look of the great windowless citadels of consumerism, Walmart, and the rest. When you get inside, you see the cathedral. The high, airy entrance hall leads you first on an elegantly stone-tiled floor with little bronze decorations set in here and there to an area of offices and cubicles. Most churches hide their administrative department, but this one puts it right out front. The walls are blonde wood, everything is spacious and handsome. Like the hall nave of Notre Dame, the startlingly high steel-braced wooden ceiling soars above all the small human activity down on the floor beneath. In the old cathedral, that height creates a great mysterious upper space of shadows, but the space beneath this vault is luminous. It wasn't till I entered the interior, the cathedral proper, that I understood why they built the ceiling so high. As there should be, there are great doors to open into the sacred space, and as a sacred space will do, the first sight took my breath away. I stood silent. I remembered what the word awe means. Much of the interior of the huge building is visible from that doorway, or would be, except that the whole floor is covered with immense towering blocks and piles and stacks and crates, cartons, boxes, and containers arranged in gigantically severe order, with wide aisles between each tower or bay. Only down the aisles can you see the far wall in the far distance. There are no permanent walls or divisions. The immense, splendidly cantilevered ceiling stretches serenely above it all. The air is cool, fresh, and clean, with the faintest smell of garden stuff, fresh vegetables. Vehicles run quietly up and down the aisles, mini forklifts and the like, looking quite tiny among the high blocks and stacks, constantly busy at moving crates and boxes, bringing in and taking out. Well, it isn't a cathedral. That was a metaphor. It's just a warehouse after all. But what kind of warehouse stores nothing to sell? Nothing, not one item in all these literally acres of goods is or ever will be for sale. Actually, it's a bank, but not the kind of bank where money is the only thing that happens. Here is where money doesn't happen. This is the Oregon Food Bank. It all makes sense. Every box in the great cubicle stacks between the aisles. Every carton, every can, every bottle, every crate holds food. Every carton, every can, every pound, every ounce of that food will be given to the people of Oregon who haven't the money to buy what they need to live on. It is a cathedral, after all, the cathedral of hunger. Or should I say the cathedral of generosity, of compassion, or community, or caritas? It comes to the same thing. There are people who need help. There are people who deny it, saying that God helps those who help themselves, and the poor and the unemployed are merely shiftless slackers sponging on a nanny government. There are people who don't deny poverty, but they don't want to know about it because it's all so terrible, and what can you do? And then there are people who help. This place is the most impressive proof of their existence I ever saw. Their existence, their efficiency, their influence. This space embodies human kindness. In, of course, the most unspiritual, lowly, humdrum, even gross way. In 1,000 cans of green beans, in towers of macaroni boxes, in crates of fresh-picked vegetables, in cold side chapel refrigerators of meat and cheese, in hundreds of cartons with improbable names of obscure beers on them, donated by the brewers because beer cartons are particularly sturdy and useful for packing foods, in the men and women, employees and trained volunteers operating the machinery, manning the decks, sorting and packaging the fresh produce, teaching survival skills in the food bank classrooms, kitchens, and gardens, driving the trucks that bring food in and the trucks that take food out to where it's needed. For these towering walls and blocks and reefs of goods, 12 to 18,000 pounds of food in each bay of the warehouse will vanish, melt away like sandcastles tonight or in a few days, to be replaced instantly by the supply of boxed, canned, glassed, fresh, and frozen food, which in turn will melt away in a day or a week, going where it's needed. And that's everywhere. The food bank distributes in every county of the state of Oregon, plus one county of Washington state. They don't have to look far to find people who need help getting enough to eat. Anywhere kids are to start with. Many school-age children in our country, towns, and cities don't get 3 meals a day, or even 2. Many aren't always sure if they'll get anything to eat today at all. How many? About a third of them. 1 child in 3. To put it this way, if you or I were a statistic parent with 3 statistic kids in school, one of our 3 children would be hungry, malnourished, hungry in the morning, hungry at night. The kind of hungry that makes a child feel cold all the time, makes a child stupid, makes a child sick. Which of our children? Which child? Depressing. Makes me want to go volunteer at the food bank. I used to volunteer at the food bank in Seattle all the time, and it was super fun, and I really liked the community. The tree, January 2011. We took down the Christmas tree this morning. It was a very pretty little fir, 3.5 or 4 feet tall, a tabletop tree, said the woman at the florist next to Trader Joe's where we bought it. We put it on a wooden box in the corner window of the living room, as I believe a Christmas tree should be seen from outside and also should be able to see outside. To be exact, I don't think a tree can see, but it may be aware of light and darkness, of insideness and outsideness. In any case, it looks right with the sky over it or through its branches. Before we decorated it, it stood there, sturdy, plain, dark green, a complicated higher organism, a very definite presence in the room. When we had an artificial tree, its nonentity made me realize what I feel about a living tree, not only the splendid, big, tall Christmas trees we used to have when I was a child and when my children were children, but a little one too. That it is as much a presence in a room as a person or an animal, an unmoving presence that says nothing but is there. A very taciturn visitor from Norway, perhaps, speaking no English, entirely undemanding, wanting nothing but a drink of water every few days, restful, a pleasure to look at, holding darkness in it, a forest of darkness, and the green arms held out so calmly, steadily, without effort. Our Norwegian visitor leaned out into the room a little. We couldn't get it quite vertical with the screw pins in the base, but nobody could see it from the side anyhow, as it stood between the writing desk and the bookcase, so we didn't worry. It was beautifully symmetrical without having had its branch tips sheared off with a hedge trimmer, as a lot of trees so often have. It certainly was a lot tree. It had never been in the forest I saw in it. It had grown on some slope not far from Mount Hood, probably, along with hundreds or thousands of other young firs in straight rows, one of the dreariest sights in our farmlands, almost as soul-blighting as a clear-cut. It is often a sign of the small farmer giving up crop growing, crowded out by agribusiness, or the non-farmer putting in a tree lot as a tax write-off. Our tree had not known forest. It was a forest tree all the same, and it had known rain, sun, ice, storm, all the weathers, all the winds, and no doubt a few birds in its day, and the stars in its night. We put the lights up on the tree. We put the old golden bird with the ratty tail on top, the small gold glass snail shell ornaments we bought for our 2-foot tree in Paris in '54, a dozen of them and a dozen gold glass walnuts, 1 walnut left, and 9 snails, one with a hole in its tissue fragile shell, go on the top branches because they are small and weigh nothing, and you can see them there. The bigger glass balls, some of which are so old they are crazed and translucent, go lower down. The bigger they are, the lower they go. It is a rule of life. The little beasts, tigers and lions and cats and elephants, dangle on loops from the branches. The little birds sit up on them, clutching with unsteady wire claws. Now and then a bird loses its grip and is found upside down under its branch and has to be reseated. The tree looks very nice, a proper Christmas tree, except the LED lights are really much, much too bright for it. They are small but violent. Old-fashioned frosted lights too big for this little tree would suit it better, with their soft diffuse glow, which you could hide among the branches. And some of the colors of the LEDs are terrible. A screaming magenta is the worst. What has magenta to do with Christmas or anything else? I take off all the magenta and airport landing strip blue and have it green, red, and gold if I could, but the strings come with 5 colors and they don't seem to sell replacement lights. You have to buy a whole new string, which will, of course, have the same 5 colors. I made little tubes of tissue paper and slipped them over the small, fiercely glaring bulbs, but it didn't make much difference, and it looked kind of crummy. All the same, I left them on. So Christmas came, and the tree shone each day and each night until I unplugged it before going to bed. I know you don't really have to turn the lights off. LEDs burn so cool, but safety is safety and habit is habit. And anyhow, it seems wrong not to let a tree have darkness. Sometimes after I unplugged it, I stood with it and looked at it, silent and dark in the room, lit only by the glow of the small electric candle behind it that illuminates the sign in the window that says peace. The candle casts faint, complicated shadows up on the ceiling through the branches and needles. The trees smelled lovely in the dark. So Christmas went, and the New Year came, and on the day after New Year's Day, I said we ought to take the tree down, so we did. I wanted to keep it one more day after we took the lights and ornaments off. I liked the tree so much without any decorations, I didn't want to lose that quiet presence in the room. It hadn't even started to drop needles, but Atticus is not one for half measures. He took the tree out into the garden and did what had to be done. He has told me that when it came time for his father to kill the pig he'd raised by hand all year, he'd hire a man to do it and would leave the house and not come back till the sausage was being made, but Atticus did the deed himself. After all, the tree had already been cut from its roots. Its life with us was only a slow dying. A real Christmas tree, a cut tree, is a ritual sacrifice. Better not to deny the fact, but to accept and ponder it. He saved me some of the dark branches to put in water in a bowl in the front hall. When the trunk dries out, it will be good firewood. Next Christmas, maybe. Sweet. Okay, I'm going to pause for now. I think we have 4 more chapters. Woo! See you soon.